A severe weather outbreak is expected today and tomorrow. Hello, I am Pat from Pat's Path Predictor, and in this video we're going to be going over all the risks that are going to be going on in Texas today as well as in Mississippi tomorrow as the Day 2 outlook has come in with some of those values. So let's go ahead and get right into this so we can go over what's going on. Alright, so as you can see right here, the enhanced risk area has been extended. It has retracted a bit from Houston, but now it's expanded through pretty much all of the Dallas suburbs. Waco's now more in the middle of it. It now encompasses Austin. San Antonio's right on the edge of it. So I'm going to pull up the counties real quickly just to give you some context, because the DFW suburbs are right here, and they're all in this enhanced risk. The northern suburbs of Houston, including northern Harris County, is in this enhanced risk as well. So, yeah, this also expands all the way to Shreveport, Louisiana now, so we have to keep an eye on this very closely. So, now let's go ahead and take a look at the risks. The tornado risk is 10%, but there's that hatched area, which means there are EF2 to EF5 tornadoes possible within 25 miles of a point. So, potentially strong tornadoes are possible in this storm. The wind threat is now up to 30%. It was 15%. They've upped it to 30% now in some areas, including just outside Dallas, Shreveport, just outside of Houston as well. The hail threat has remained at 30%. However, that hatched area has expanded quite a ways. It now encompasses Dallas, encompasses Wichita Falls, it encompasses San Antonio. It's retracted a little bit from Houston, and in fact, it's expanded a little bit to Houston, as a matter of fact. But yeah, that 30% is all in that hatched area. A huge chunk of that 15% is as well. And that means there is the possibility of 2-inch hail in diameter or greater within 25 miles of a point right there. So let's go ahead and talk about the summary and synopsis right here. There is an enhanced risk for severe thunderstorms in central and east Texas. Summary: several thunderstorms, very large hail, and damaging winds are possible, focused on central to eastern Texas and adjacent states. The primary severe threat should begin mid to late afternoon and last throughout tonight. A few tornadoes could be strong, so that's already a bad sign. Northwest to south central Texas and far southern Oklahoma. A blossoming elevated convective development is expected by midday as the mid-level heights falls overspread strengthening warm Theta E advection regime. This activity will delineate the northern bounds of the surface-based thunderstorms later today, with a pronounced baroclinic zone likely becoming established near the Red River border of Oklahoma, Texas by 0Z or 6 or 5 a.m. Excuse me. Okay, it just updated it. It updates every couple of minutes. So, along the western extent of this baroclinic zone will lie surface cyclone drifting from southern Texas, the southern Texas Panhandle, near south the Childress vicinity. As robust mid-level DCVA occurs with a shortwave impulse ejecting out of the base development is anticipated throughout early to mid-afternoon near the Triple Point Cyclone and arsing south along the dry line during the late afternoon across portions of central and south Texas. With so much preceding precipitation falling within the vicinity of dry boundary in Oklahoma, the corridor of surface-based buoyancy near a Triple Point Cyclone is expected to be narrow. Nevertheless, cooling of 500 millibar temperatures and steep mid-level lapse rates should foster potential for a few semi-discrete supercells along this upper portion of the Red River Valley. Severe hail, and brief tornadoes will probably be the main hazards as convection likely spreads into the less favorable environment and extent in Oklahoma. Convection further southeast and south of the north central to south central Texas will have progressively larger warm moist sector above ahead of the dry line, with Cape likely to reach 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. Now, just for context, 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. That's when that's when things are really getting serious, because 3,000 joules per kilogram, that is I consider that a lot of energy right there. Like, heck, I even consider 2,000 joules per kilogram at least a more moderate to a lot of energy. So this is where things start to be taken seriously, so please keep that in mind. In conjunction with an approaching 80 knot 500 millibar speed max, several supercells should develop with a primary initial threat of very large hail. Much of the convective development will initially be west of the strong low-level jet across the eastern Texas, Oklahoma. The bulk of the guidance suggests that the low-level jet will shift east to northeast during the evening, which suggests a low-level hydrograph curvature and attendant SRH, while adequate for tornadoes, which may not be particularly large for supercells initiating along the driveline. Nevertheless, hourly HRRR, or the HRR, runs along with the 0Z HRW ARW are insistent on potential for a couple of long-track supercells emanating northwest from I-35 corridor, in central central Texas and parts of East Texas. If confidence increases in this scenario occurring, it is plausible. Okay, I'm going to highlight this last part. It is plausible that a mesocyclone corridor of Cat 4, which is moderate risk, may be warranted in later outlooks. So, in English for you guys, the severe basically for context, the conditions are pretty favorable for severe weather, and there's the possibility of a couple of long-track supercells. And if that confidence continues to increase, they're going to issue a moderate risk in later outlooks. And the next one comes out at 6:30 Zulu or about 11:30 Central Time. So we'll have to figure that out. So yeah, now let's go ahead and go to the day 2 outlook, where the moderate risk continues for parts of Mississippi, but the enhanced risk has been expanded to the very tip of Texas, into most of Louisiana, most of Mississippi, parts of western Alabama. Mobile is right outside of that enhanced risk, so it is possible it could be in that enhanced risk in later outlooks, but I'm just take what I just said with a grain of salt. There is a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms for portions of southern eastern Louisiana and into southern and central Mississippi. Summer, a regional severe weather outbreak, including potential for significant damaging tornadoes, remains evident over the lower Mississippi Valley, central Gulf Coast region Tuesday. Synopsis, an expansive upper trough extending from the Arctic north-central Canada to Mexico will stretch across the central U.S. plain states at the start of the period. A surroundingly high amplified belt of cyclonic flow will cover much of the country, though flanking stout ridging will reside over both the western and eastern states throughout the period. This trough will make a slow eastward progress, though a digging lobe of shortwave energy is forecast to shift out of New Mexico into far west Texas, into northern Mexico during the second half of the period. At the surface, an occluding low should reside over eastern Kansas at the start of the period, with a cold front extending southward across East Texas. A synoptic warm front is expected to reside over the Tennessee Valley / Mid-South region throughout the day, though the effect of the warm front making the northern fringe of the higher Theta E Gulf boundary layer, which will remain further south. Northward advance of this front will likely be influenced by convection to the cooler side of this boundary. By the latter stages of the period, the low should reside over the Illinois vicinity, with the cold front expanding from the Tennessee Valley into the western portions of the Florida Panhandle. From far east Texas to Alabama, let's go ahead and talk about this. Indications are that an outbreak of severe thunderstorms remain likely Tuesday, centered along the lower Mississippi Valley region and vicinity. Thunderstorms, in all hazards severe risk, will be ongoing at the start of the period from East Texas across the Arklaw-Tex region. Steady eastward progression of this band of the prefrontal convection will occur, as persistent warm sector southerlies advect Gulf moisture northward. Given the very strong south-southwesterly flow aloft of the low-level southerlies, and aided by an amply unstable air mass, strongly rotating storms are expected throughout the morning, spreading out of East Texas into Louisiana. Tornadoes, along with the potential for significant events, remain a likelihood, along with damaging wind and hail. So, I want to talk about this last point. Tornadoes, including a potential for significant events, remain a likelihood. So, that's the kind of wording that SPC is putting out on this. So that means that everyone who's watching this from Louisiana, Mississippi, that area, they need to be taking this very seriously. Otherwise, bad things could happen, and one loss of life is too many. So In addition to the prefrontal band of storms that will spread eastward in the time across an enhanced and eventually moderate risk area, isolated cellular development will be possible in the zone of strong warm advection ahead of the primary convection band. Any such cells will quickly acquire updraft rotation and will pose potential for significant/damaging tornadoes. As such, some areas may experience more than one round of potentially significant weather. Okay, that makes the situation even more worse because if you're getting more than one round of severe weather, that's like areas that have already been hit could be hit again and hamper rescue efforts if that were to occur. The bounds of the northern fringe of the risk area remains difficult to discern, as very strong shear will exist well north, but with the ongoing elevated convection likely to limit northward advance of the more favorable low-level air. Still, severe storm risk currently appears to extend at least from far north as Mississippi, northern Mississippi to northern Alabama. Severe tornado risk will continue through the evening and overnight as the cold front and associated prefrontal convection advances. At this time, it appears that the risk may extend as far east as eastern Alabama and the western parts of the Florida Panhandle late in the period. So that's the synopsis right here. And if you got anything from this, take this very seriously, because this stuff is not kidding around. These storms don't kid around at all. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about this. The tornado threat is probably the biggest threat here. In fact, the reason there is a moderate risk out is because there is a 15% chance in that hatched area with significant severe hatched areas right there, which means there's a 10% or greater probability of EF2 to EF5 tornadoes within 25 miles of a point. And I talked about this in my other video on what do all these risks mean. So that is why this moderate risk has been issued. There's a 15% chance of tornadoes, which for a tornado threat, that is a considerable threat right there. And I know 15% for hail and wind doesn't seem like that, but for tornadoes, that is a considerable amount of threat that right there. Now the wind threat, 30% right here. This is what is warranting the enhanced risk all around it. 30% right here from eastern Texas all the way to Alabama right here. 15% are just around that, just west of Birmingham, and basically around that area. The marginal risk continues outward. The hail threat is more concentrated around Louisiana, New Orleans, Jackson, and Mississippi. So 15% for the rest of it, including Greenville, Mobile. 5% for the rest of Alabama, Mississippi, the rest of Louisiana, and parts of eastern Texas right there. So I wanted to go over this real quickly because this thing is not kidding around. Take this very seriously, and I will update you guys as the situation develops. But until that time, I'm going to wrap this video up right here. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I hope you've got something out of this. If you got anything out of this, take this very seriously. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so that way more people can be informed and we can get this information out more to more of the public. But until that time, have a wonderful day, get prepared, but most importantly, guys, stay safe.